Call this meeting to order at 6 PM. This is a regular meeting for Tuesday, March 1st, 2022. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll?
I will. Tim Hale, are you on the phone?
Here.
Stephanie Nowers.
Here.
Dee McKee. Robert Yunt, are you on the phone?
Here.
Moki 2.
Here.
Jesse Sumner.
Here.
Ron Bernier, are you on the phone?
Here.
We have a quorum, Madam Mayor.
Yes.
Thank you. Sorry, I thought he was going to say something. Is there anything the members would like to pull from the consent agenda? No? Okay. Yes.
Excuse me, hang on a second here. I gotta
Sure,
open my book and find out where I
I'll
am.
let you get organized.
Yep. Okay, hold on. The AM 22013. And I think that's, yeah, but there's one under introductions. That's not under consent agenda, so I don't have to worry about that right now. Okay. Yeah, I just
and
had
then-
some questions about 2201. No, not 013, 014, 22014. Sorry about that.
Okay. Assemblyperson McKee, the next question I will ask will be changes to the agenda. So at that time, you could bring up the other one,
Bring up the other,
the one that you were saying for the introduction.
oh, okay.
So there's two separate questions,
All right,
okay?
thank you.
I just want to clarify, if I could, Madam Mayor.
Sure.
Assemblymember McKee, you wanted to pull AM 22014 and not 013, correct?
That's right.
Okay, thank you.
014. And then there was one under
Is there
introductions I wanted to ask
any
about.
other items to be pulled from the consent agenda? Okay, is there any changes to the agenda? Deputy Mayor?
Madam Mayor, I would like to pull ordinance 22-003 from introduction.
Okay. Is there any objections to that being pulled? Okay. So then it is pulled. And Assemblyperson McKee, did you have one also, or was that the same one that you wanted to pull?
Yeah, under introductions, and I was just curious about OR 22025 that Rob was sponsoring. I just had some questions about it because do I talk about that now?
Next
No.
meeting.
Okay.
Next meeting.
On that, we're setting the public hearing for next meeting, so that would be appropriate.
Thank you.
Yes, go ahead, Madam Clerk.
I would like to request the Assembly pull ordinance 22021 from public hearing tonight. We didn't advertise it correctly, and I would like to get it advertised correctly before we hold the public hearing. So I'd like the Assembly to postpone that public hearing to March 15th if we could. It's 22021. It's the one permanently allowing telephonic participation by the public. So on page 4, you may not have it on your agenda, and that's the problem. Is there any objection? Is there any objection?
Okay,
This is Rob Yunt.
go ahead, sir.
I don't have it on my agenda either. I'll make a motion to pull it from this evening's introductions and introduce it at the next meeting.
Introduce it or?
Public hearing. He means
Public hearing. Public hearing, sir, is that okay for your motion? Rather than?
Yes, ma'am, that's fine.
Yeah, rather than introduction, okay.
Is there any objection?
Is there any objections to that motion? Don't see any, okay. Are there any other changes to the agenda? Okay. Hearing none, then the agenda is approved as amended, I guess, is what I should say, huh? Okay. Will you all stand, please? And I want to put some people on the spot. We have some homeschoolers here tonight. So I was wondering if Caleb and Ann would lead us in the pledge. The flag is right here. So just go ahead and start, one of you or both of you.
Allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the regular assembly meeting minutes from the 15th of February, 2022. Are there any changes to the minutes as they have been presented? Hearing none, the minutes are approved as presented. The next items are our agency reports, and I would assume we have one from the city of Wasilla, huh? Sounds good. Good evening, twice in one day here, lady. Yeah,
We're getting to be real good friends hanging out together.
that's right, yeah.
Good evening, Mayor DeVries, Manager Brown, and Assembly. I'm Glenda Ledford, Mayor for the City of Wasilla. Happening at the Menard Sports Center, the Spring Learn to Skate Ice Show is March 4th. The MHL and IHL hockey tournament is on March 8th through 13th, with the 18U Tier 1 State Hockey Tournament to be held on March 12th through the 14th. And that's all the hockey for that week. And our crews are quite busy with keeping the roads and bike paths clear as possible of ice and snow. And that's about all that's happening in Wasilla. But as usual, we're open for business. Is there any questions? Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Always nice to have you. Yeah, I don't see anybody from city of Houston or city of Palmer. Do you? Okay. Do we have a report from the school district? Don't see anybody. We have a report from the state of Alaska, sir.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Manager Brown, members of the Assembly. I always like to hear Mayor Ledford say we're open for business. So state of Alaska is open for business as well. The one thing that the last 3 years have taught me, and I know the governor's keenly aware of it, is the importance of Alaska and our self-sufficiency and our independence. And COVID, supply chain issues, events that are happening in Europe right now really bring to light the importance of us being able to develop our resources responsibly. And it is our constitutional obligation to do so. And we continue to look for ways to do that in the state of Alaska, and the governor continues to work on that. And we appreciate the Matsu Borough's response to that as well. It's great to hear the conversations and the questions asked. I appreciate Assemblymember Nauer's always wanting more information about economic opportunities, and Assemblymember Sumner's comments, and just everyone really looking into making sure that we're doing things responsibly, and that's what it should be about. That's what the public process is about. The governor is also working on a couple of other things that we're hoping will make Alaska a much stronger place. I hope that you have been able to do a little research into the People First initiative. There are problems that have plagued us for a really long time. Sexual assault, domestic violence, homelessness, public safety issues. And it's been a pleasure for myself personally, because I've been working on this for a couple of years now on elements of the People First initiative. And if you haven't looked at that, please do. There are a number of task force involved with that, and we have a lot of MATSU participation in that. And so it's great. I'm looking forward to seeing what happens with that. I know personally, like I said, just the work that I've done on it, it's much more than just rhetoric. It's something that we're taking seriously, and we're hoping to make some positive changes with that. The other item that I think is important is the Food Security Task Force. And I know I've had communications with members of the agricultural community, including Amy Pettit with Alaska Farmland Trust. And I really would encourage people to look at the positions on that Food Security Task Force, because there's a lot of skill in Palmer and in the Valley, and expertise that could be used on that task force. And what we're looking for is ideas for legislation or reduced regulations to promote agricultural production, and not just with crops, but also potentially some livestock, whether that's chickens or pork or what have you. So please take a look at that Food Security Task Force. You can find information on that in the boards and commissions area. And so we're hoping that people will participate in that. You know, the same problems continue to exist at our state level, and the legislature seems to be a little more motivated this year to accomplish some things. Maybe it has to do with an election year, I don't know. But there is talk of, with a budget surplus now, of a PFD that could reflect the governor's 50-50 plan. And hopefully that will be the case, because as you know, with higher prices and inflation, we could, most of us could really use that. So with higher gas prices and everything else. So we'll continue to watch that and work with the legislature. But more importantly, we are hoping that with the additional revenues, that the legislature will put forward some long-term solutions. And the governor continues to work on that. He has proposed legislation that will do that. And so we're hoping that the legislature will hear some of those bills, some of those constitutional amendments, and move on those this year. But that remains to be seen. Session's about half over at this point. So that's about all I have. But I'm happy to take any questions if anybody has any.
Thank you, through the mayor. Thank you, Todd. I really appreciate the reports, and that on the food security issue, you know, we're just a hop, skip, and a jump from the Matanuska experiment farm, which has a long history in the state of supporting agriculture. It was one of 6 experiment stations. And I hope that part of that task force is looking at the research angle of supporting agriculture in the state. I know they used to be a very thriving research institution there. They developed the barley variety that Alaska Barley Company uses, and that's homegrown. That's in Delta, and you can buy their products there in 3
I
Bears
have
now.
some pancake mix, actually.
Yeah,
It's pretty good.
I like the couscous. And you know, they're supporting the peony farmers, which is a niche market for us when we think about economic development. So I know I know people have been paying attention to that. And I think there were some thoughts to definitely have research, maybe through the university, be represented on that task force as well. So we support the industry.
Yes, and I know to that point also, in the university's proposed gravel extraction and use of some of that, some of those that site. So I did speak with Amy Pettit about that, and was able to give her a Board of Regents name. Sorry, through the mayor. I forget that protocol. And so hopefully that group is going to be able to make a connection with some additional people in the university, and see if you can get some more information on that issue as well. I'm not going to say the governor has issued a reward or anything, but I will say that if anybody can come up with an Alaskan-made poultry food that is economical, the governor would be thrilled to death. So that's what, every time he sees me, first he teases me about having chickens because the ducks are better apparently. But then he says, so have you figured out how to make poultry food yet in Alaska? So I would consider it a personal favor if you had any ideas. That would be good.
Anyone else have any questions of Todd? No. Thank you, sir.
All right, thanks.
And Joint Assembly School Board, I don't believe we've had a meeting since last time, so. And are there any public relation reports? Go ahead, Assembly
I would
Person.
like to say that I attended the Planning Board Commission last night, and we were talking about OR 22-002. And I will be making some amendments on that in the near future here.
Okay, thank you. Any other public relations reports? Okay, Mr. Brown, do you have reports, sir, for us?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and good evening. I'll be very brief, but tonight on the consent agenda is AM 22013, which is a resolution supporting the renewal of our state lobbyist contract. And I am supportive of that. What I wanted to bring to your attention, because it's not going to show up on an agenda, is that administration does not intend to renew the federal lobbyist contract. So you won't see that coming before you, because at this point we do not intend to renew that contract. So I just wanted to formally notify the Assembly of that. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Questions of the manager's report? No? Okay. Mr. Attorney, you have information for us, sir?
Yes. Again, we have an executive session on the agenda for tonight. I don't think we need to have it. As you know, I notified the Assembly members, we did file an appeal of the judge's order on the redistricting case. It was also in the newspaper. Everybody, Callista has reserved their right to file a reply brief, but did not file a direct appeal. Anyway, there was a calendaring order, a status hearing had with the Supreme Court clerk. Briefs are due tomorrow, which is the 2nd. So I'll be coordinating with outside counsel tomorrow morning. We'll be finalizing the draft and submitting it. Response briefs, or opposition briefs more appropriately, are due a week and a day from tomorrow, so a week Thursday. And then a week Friday after that, which is the 18th of March, will be oral argument. It'll be televised, probably over YouTube or the court's channel, one of the two. In addition to pursuing the claims that we had at the trial court regarding our overpopulation, and then basically the gerrymandering claims, including Valdez, but cutting out all the other Richardson Highway and Glen Highway communities, and also the Cantwell cutout. We're pursuing those claims with the Supreme Court. We did add a couple of issues because of what occurred at the trial court. For those of you that may or may not remember, 10 years ago, the redistricting board was found to be in violation of the Open Meetings Act for going into executive session illegally. However, the court at that time said, well, there's really no remedy. I'm just going to declare that you violated the law, but I'm not going to do anything about it. Same thing happened here. The court found that the board went into executive session illegally for purposes of discussing items with their attorney. As you know from hearing from me, you cannot go into executive session to get general legal advice. It's against state law. The board did it anyway. And one of the things we asked the court to rule on was whether or not that constituted a waiver of the attorney-client privilege. Because think about it. If you want to talk to your attorney privately, you just go in illegally. And if you have no consequence of doing that, then what good is the law? Because if the board would have followed the law, that entire discussion would have happened in public. We would know what it was. The court didn't rule on that issue. So both we've appealed that and the board has appealed it as well. There's also various discovery rulings that we're appealing as well. So that'll be filed tomorrow. If anybody's interested in good sleeping reading material, you can contact me. I'll be more than happy to send you a copy of our brief, or anybody else's brief for that matter, if you'd like to read them. And I'll keep you posted. But I don't think we need an executive session. Our issues are very public. We've talked about them all along, and oral argument will not be until after the Assembly meeting on the 15th, and the Supreme Court has to rule by April 1st, because candidate filing deadline opens June 1. And so when you back that up, because of the administrative process necessary to get that all set up, they need a decision from the court by April 1st. So we expect a very quick decision. So
Madam Mayor?
Yes, go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through the mayor to the attorney. So there was a part of the ruling that came down from the Superior Court was that they had not followed public input that had been given to them. And I know a lot of folks, and myself included, and the Butte Community Council gave public testimony to the board about the Valdez issue. Is that a issue that you're going to raise with the Supreme Court, or is that kind of already passed and not something that we can touch on?
So we obviously are appealing the general finding that it was appropriate to include Valdez with Mat-Su. We are not pursuing it on that basis of, you didn't listen to everybody. The rulings on East Anchorage Senate pairings and then the Skagway House District, the reason the judge ruled that way is because what the judge found was, look, this stuff came out of the blue. You didn't even consider testimony on Senate pairings. In fact, you didn't even do Senate pairings until the day before you adopted the plan. Therefore, that was illegal under the Constitution because you're supposed to adopt that within 30 days, which the board didn't do. So we are pressing forward on our claims regarding the impropriety that we should not have been paired with Valdez, which, by the way, Valdez is pressing forward as well. I can't say for sure what our brief is going to look like in terms of those arguments tomorrow, but we're not focusing in on, well, a lot of people wanted it because the judge basically said, look, that the redistricting board did consider Valdez. They did discuss Valdez over and over and over, and we're simply stuck with where to put it. Therefore, they put it with Mat-Su. I don't find fault with that. Our argument to that is more along the lines of the only reason it got put with Mat-Su is because they refused to consider amendments to Anchorage. They refused to consider amendments to Fairbanks, and they refused to consider amendments to any of the western districts, what we call the VRA districts. They follow the native corporation lines. And so if you refuse to consider changes to basically 3/4 of the state, of course you have to put Valdez with us. And what we're saying is that refusal was in error.
Thank you.
Any other questions of the attorney? Okay, thank you, sir. Madam Clerk, do you have a report?
The clerk's report is in your red folder. It includes all the upcoming budget meetings. Those are also added to it. And then also attached to the clerk's report is next Tuesday's Joint Assembly Planning Commission meeting agenda.
Any questions of the clerk? Okay. The next item on our agenda is citizens and other correspondence. Are there any comments on the citizens or other correspondence being presented? Okay, hearing none, they are presented. Madam Clerk, would you read it into the record, the IMs, please?
IM 22026, reporting the conclusion of contract for bid 21092B with Scarcella Brothers Incorporated for a final contract amount of $538,317.98 for the Michelle Drive Improvements Project. IM 22049, informing the Assembly of the 7 grant amendments for the state designated legislative grant program that were signed by the Borough Mayor. Manager. IM 22056, reporting manager waivers of formal bidding procedures in accordance with MSB 3.08320B for January 2022.
Need to put on the mic, huh? Sorry about that. Are there any comments on the IMs? Okay, hearing none, the IMs are presented. The next item is persons to be heard. We have no persons to be heard. The next item is.
Audience participation, that's not persons to be heard.
Okay, sorry.
Okay, we've now reached public hearings. You will have 3 minutes to testify. There is a number of public hearings, so we'll take them one at a time, and if you have testimony for each one, you're welcome to do that. But please keep your testimony to that particular ordinance that is, the public hearing is being held on. And so, Madam Clerk, would you go ahead and read the first item into legislation into the record?
Ordinance 22018, an ordinance approving an appropriation of $31,104 from the Road Service Area Administrative Fund and projected fund balance for wages and benefits for a new project management and engineering administrative specialist position to cover the period of March 1st, 2022 to June 30th, 2022. And if you're on the phone and would like to speak to this, press *3.
Okay, is there a staff report, sir?
I'll touch this one briefly,
Okay.
Madam Mayor. This is a short-term fix. I mean, as we gear up for this transportation systems package, this buys some additional admin support to keep track of all the projects that we have to now execute. So this buys us time until we can get a position into the budget and have that conversation.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and open the public hearing on ordinance 22-018. Is there anyone that would like to testify before the assembly? Okay, seeing none, we do not have anybody online. I'll give you one last chance. Anybody that wants to testify regarding ordinance 22-018? Okay. So I'll close the public hearing. Deputy Mayor,
I move to adopt ordinance 22-018.
is there any discussion? Is there any objection? And since we have a number of assembly people online, I will take a little bit of a pause there just to be sure that we don't miss any of their comments. Okay, hearing no objection, the legislation passes. Madam Clerk, the next item for public hearing, please.
Ordinance 22019, an ordinance reappropriating $1 million from the Emergency Response Reserve Fund 100 to Fund 445, project number 55030 for the 2022 windstorm disaster. Accompanying resolution 22021, a resolution approving the scope and work and budget for the 2022 windstorm disaster.
Okay, is there a staff report or are you going to handle it? Oh, I'm sorry. Hi.
Through the mayor to the assembly. As you know, a disaster was declared at the beginning of January. This legislation brings forward appropriation of the reserves so we can fund the expenditures that were incurred as part of this disaster. This does not preclude state funding to reimburse us for this. It's just that until we sort out the state funding, this allows us to pay the bills.
Okay. I'm ready. Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing on ordinance 22-019 and resolution 22-021. Is there anyone that would like to testify on either one of these ordinance or resolution? Is anybody signed up? No. Okay. No? All righty. One last chance. Okay. So Deputy Mayor?
I move to adopt ordinance 22-019 and resolution 22-021.
Is there discussion? Is there any objection? Hearing no objection, the legislation passes. Madam Clerk?
Ordinance 22020, an ordinance establishing a task force to review and make recommendations to the Assembly regarding road service area services in Big Lake Road Service Area number 21 and potentially other areas. If you're on the phone and would like to speak to this, press *3.
Okay. Is there a staff report? Oh, Nick is going to speak. Okay, go ahead, sir. Okay.
So the manager put me on the hot seat for this one. As the assembly knows, a couple meetings ago, there was a resolution introduced to direct the manager to proceed forward with time and materials, contract structure in the Big Lake RSA through discussions both from the public and And then at the assembly table, that was changed to potentially direct the manager to form a task force, basically a working group, to look into these issues and come back with recommendations. State law says that advisory boards to be formed to advise the assembly and the borough are supposed to be formed by ordinance. So before you is a non-code ordinance, which would require that the mayor appoint, the assembly confirm, a group of people to accomplish the goals as laid out in this ordinance. The ordinance has a sunset date. It expires at the end of this year with a directive to the group that they present a written report and orally deliver it, basically come to the last meeting, assembly meeting of the year and present their findings about time and material, road service area, delivery of services and whatnot, as laid out in the IM and the ordinance. A couple other things that this will do is this will make sure that the Open Meetings Act applies, so that anybody who wants to come and see what's going on can do so, because all the meetings have to be advertised.
Okay, thank you, sir. So I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing. We do have for ordinance 22-020. And the first people I'm going to ask to speak are the ones that signed up. And Dan Mayfield, you're first, sir.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Assembly. Looking at this ordinance, I don't really have a problem with the substance or with the setup of the task force. I think it's a good thing to look at substandard roads and partially impassable roads. And, but I do think that if we do establish a task force, it does need to be independent. And you need to be able to, as an assembly, you need to be able to rely on that task force and what their recommendations are. So I would make this suggestion to you in that, the ordinance does state that the mayor will appoint the members of the task force. I would think that some of the best experts that we have on roads and how to address roads and communities are members of RSA boards. But I would suggest that we look at, since this doesn't just talk about Big Lake, it also talks about possibility of including other areas. I would suggest that you have an RSA member from each of the from each assembly member's district. And in that way, you can have a clear exchange of ideas as to how to address substandard roads, how communities should go forward with that, and how they should address impassable roads. It is a problem, but we're unfortunately in our community, we're finding that that our assembly members simply changes the RSA approved list. And really, with that change, there really is no need for a task force at all because he's already made up his mind. But I think, if we have a shared committee of RSA experts who can look at the issues that are involved and make a recommendation, then I think the entire borough would be served by that. So that would be my recommendation, is you could amend this ordinance to specify that it's not just a committee appointed by the mayor, but also with representatives from each RSA, or at least representatives from each district. Thank you.
Terry, you're next, sir.
Madam Mayor, to assembly members. You all got a handout I passed out last week, taking out some of the whereases according to some of the programs resolutions that were canceled last week, the pilot program. Everybody probably read that. Some of these things I don't believe that are in the current resolution here, ordinance, are applicable today. I think that everybody got a loud and clear picture about impassable roads. I think that Public Works heard it very clearly. I think that everybody heard it clearly throughout all the RSAs. And not that I'm against the task force, I think it's always good to get input, but I ask now, is that the best use of time, and will we really come up with the best solutions at the end of that based on a hand-picked group of people? It's open to public meetings, so everybody's going to be there, and there's going to be conflict. I'm sure you know how that can go, mostly with what's going on in the RSA 21. So I think if some of those components were taken out, and if that task force was to go forward, that they could focus on fixing the contracts. I mean, Mr. Twos, who had contracts, I mean, at one point in time, he had 7 million, or I think it was between $7 and $9 million worth of contracts in the borough. They cited him for lots of issues. I've looked through it. I don't know that I agree with all that he was cited for. He's brought some of those issues up with the original contractor now, but I can see his input about what needs to get changed in some of the contracts would have made it more applicable for his company when it was operating on those, when they were giving him citing him for things. I can see that now as I read them, some of the things he's brought up. So the pilot program, has been taken out. I don't think the pilot program is really necessary now in Big Lake. If we look at just what happened this last week, we had this very large snowstorm. So I called McKenna Brothers, because before it was on time materials, we got the $1 million for time materials. So I called the McKenna Brothers and asked them during this last, multi-snowstorm, what their costs were, what happened between, in RSA 21, and then they've got another RSA a little farther north. It will take them to the end of summer to break even. That's how much, their contract requires them to have 5 pieces of equipment. They had between 13 and 15 pieces of equipment in RSA 21, almost equal to that up there. They had 3 times as many employees, accomplishing the task. And they were doing that just under the normal contract. They didn't get any more money. So if we ask Terry Dolan what those folks got before under the T&M contract that we're paying getting the $1 million for covering, and we compare it to that week, you will see that, the differential is phenomenal. So I ask you to again, please look at those changes that I passed out last week in regards to that, and I really appreciate everybody's time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mike Shields? I think, sir, you were signed up under audience participation. We moved you to this one. Is that okay?
Bless you.
Yeah,
Thank you,
okay.
Madam Mayor.
All right.
And Madam Mayor and members of the Assembly, we did pass a resolution at our last big board meeting, and I'm not sure that it made it into the packets. I'm also not sure if it made it into the packets. You've had time to read it. So I'm just going to read it to you. It's a resolution from the big board regarding this ordinance 2020 and the IM with it that creates the task force. Whereas this ordinance, as presented on February 15th and now scheduled for public hearing on March 1st, requires MSB administration to create a task force to study the issues, among which are the applicability and annualized costs of T&M contracts for MSB maintenance, roads maintenance, their scalability to cover all 16 RSAs, and the reasons behind and possible corrective actions for such a high percentage of borough roads being substantially below MSB quality standards. It isn't just Big Lake, everybody's got them. Whereas, given the large volume of information, including comparative costs with our current maintenance contract format and the wealth of maintenance contracting experience available from members of this board and the individual RSA boards, starting all the way back with the MSB Blue Ribbon Task Force in 2007, 2008, we question the real need for yet another task force. And whereas if this new task force is created, we believe it is essential to include members of this board, the Transportation Advisory Board, and the public in its membership. Otherwise, its findings and recommendations must be seen as suspect by the RSA taxpayers. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the following persons' positions are hereby presented to the mayor for appointment to the task force. Tom Phillips, RSA 20 primary. Dan Tucker, RSA 9 primary. Bill Haller, RSA 21 primary. Dan Elliott, retired, lives in RSA. He's a resident taxpayer, and at least one member of the Transportation Advisory Board of their choice. This passed by unanimous vote, and we hope you'll keep it in mind.
Thank you.
Any
sir.
questions?
No,
Wanna
Thank you,
throw
sir.
spitwads?
Is there anyone in the audience? Thank you. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to testify on ordinance 22-020? Caleb, do we have anybody online? All right, go ahead, sir.
Hi, this is Irene Crowley. Sorry I couldn't make it there. I'm in a bit of ice. But the task force sounds all good and well in theory. But I'm just wondering, after so much meetings and knocking heads together, how much more would the task force have accomplished versus going with our original RIP list, which I live back on Echo Lake Road. That was a bone of contention with several people, including in the frontiersmen today. I live back here. I listen to people back here, and they're all very angry that the RIP list got just ripped up and thrown away. The reason that we have the RIP list is to be able to address the problems, the impassable roads. If we put this one aside and go on to the next one, and then the next one, and then the next one, we're going to be an impassable road. So my question is, how can and why did Moki 2 take away our RIP list? I mean, everybody agreed on it. So it's really a conundrum. I can't understand it. But I do believe that if your task force is put to task and they actually act and come out with a reasonable solution, then yay, we've all won. But I've been in government enough to know that task forces will give their recommendations, and many times they go off to the side because another political idea has come about that's better than that. And so, yeah, I'm hoping that we do get something out of it, but I'm not holding my breath. So thank you.
Thank you. Caleb, do we have another person? Okay. Go ahead online, please.
Hello, my name is Cindy Bettini, and I'm commenting on resolution serial number 22020 on the task force. A lot of what I was going to say has been said by Mike Shields. As I look at this and have served on many different committees for the borough, this seems like it's really heavy with borough staff, and I'm not sure that this is really a necessary priority for the borough right now. I feel like it's come about because of the ordinance to switch Big Lake RSA 21 to time and materials contract in the middle of a contract, and that this is sort of a substitute that came out of some public comments over a month ago about substandard roads. And it made it sound like all the substandard roads in the borough were in Big Lake. And I don't think that that is the case. There are many roads that are in our road service areas that were put down by a bulldozer, back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s that somehow got wrapped into our RSA maintained roads. But my main thing is I believe that the RSA supervisors, particularly on the big board, should have a representation on this task force, and every district should be represented. And I know some of the people that were recommended by Mr. Shields, and I know that they will have to apply, and Madam Mayor, you could select them if you chose to, but I think it's really important to have people that are dealing with this every day and every month, and many of these people for many years. And I thank you for your time on this.
Thank you. Anyone else online, Caleb? No. Okay. So I'll bring it back to the public here. Anyone else that would like to testify on ordinance 22-020? Yes, sir, come forth.
Good evening.
evening.
My understanding of the task force,
Can we get your names, sir?
Andrew Traxler.
Thank you.
My understanding of the task force would be the purpose of studying the contract and to assess whether or not we're getting what we pay for in the contract, or are we getting more, like what was stated here a minute ago, we're getting more by the contract impossibility. And that's what my understanding of the contract is. So the RSA boards, my understanding is that their purpose is to help advise the assembly member on how to utilize the RSA funding. Their job's not to look at the contract. They just use the contract that the roads get maintained by. My understanding is the task force, the purpose of it is to study the contract specifically. So that's just all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, I don't see, I see people moving, but I don't know if they're moving this way. No, I guess not. So, do you have somebody? Oh, online. Thank you, Caleb. Go ahead, Caleb, with the person online. Thank you. Thanks, Mike.
Hi, it's Steve Edwards, EDWARDS Road Board Supervisor. So we're testifying on the 22020, is that right?
Yes, sir. On the establishment of the
Yes.
task force.
Yeah. Of course, hopefully you've seen our letter that we wrote. We're sort of not sure that that's needed because we're offering the information that you're probably looking for. You could just reach out to us and we'll try to provide it. There's a lot of talented people on the board that have experience with this. But if there is a task force, then I did want to sort of bring up another angle of this. There's been a lot talked about on the TNM thing, but another angle of it is, I'm assuming that assembly people, when they do their budget, are looking for stability. And I believe if let's say the task force does recommend TNM, so then you're going to come to budget setting thing, and let's say you pick, your budget's $5 million for road areas, and so you pick that number again, and then you have a nice dry summer, very minimal grading, no rain, and that will go into winter, and there's barely any snow, just a couple times, and you get to the end of the year, and you've only spent, let's say, $4 million. Well, then pop the corks and champagne, you saved $1 million. But then you're faced with the prospect of how you set the next budget. So let's say you pick $4 million for the next budget, and then of course it rains all fall, the roads wash out, and the shoulders and the culverts fail, and then the snows every week, and an ice storm in between with sanding and sleet and rain. And now you come to the end of the year and you spent $7 million. So you'd have to go back to the drawing board and get more money to pay that shortfall. And I assume that would come from taxes eventually. So it becomes, at that point, then what do you set the budget for the following year? How do you set that budget? So if you're looking for stability of budgets, I don't think this is the way to go because it's going to float up and down dramatically. So that's among the other reasons that we're not sure about this T&M. That one is one that might affect Assembly directly. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anybody else online, Caleb? No. Anyone else here that would like to testify that hasn't had a chance? Okay, with that, then I will close the public hearing on ordinance 22-020. And Deputy Mayor?
I move to adopt ordinance 22-0220.
Okay, discussion by the Assembly. Yes, Assemblyperson McKee, go ahead.
I'm not sure of the procedure, so I'm just going to say that I wanted to discuss this because there are several points that
Yeah, so this is the discussion on the ordinance 22-020. So you can ask questions, give your opinion, tell how you're going to vote, whatever kind of discussion you want.
and I can do that now.
Yes,
Okay, thank
please.
you. The last gentleman on the line was talking about budget stability, and I absolutely agree with him. Alaska's not exactly a predictable place, and so you've got to have some way to quantify what you think is going to happen and have some expectation that you've got that covered, and so that you don't have these horrible fluctuations like we would have had this year. So budget stability is certainly one of them. And when I've looked at all of the information, and I really have, looking at the difference in cost on the fixed price, it was something like $2,887. And on the time and maintenance, $3,953. The math, which is included in the packet here, sounds like pretty good math to me. That's a heck of a difference, and I'm not sure why we would want to do that.
Can you keep it to the task force?
Okay, I guess that's where I was going with this next one.
Yeah. To the establishment of the task force.
Certainly so. I don't know why we would need to establish a task force, because it seems to me with all the data, it's been studied ad nauseum, and all of the things, everything that pops up says, this is not a real good idea. I had a question about the task force. Who pays for the task force? How is it?
It will be in, are they getting paid $50?
Are they borough employees and
No.
then RSA
Oh.
people? And
The attorney has some answers. Thank you, sir.
So under the way this is written, there are 5 members and 2 alternates appointed by the mayor, confirmed by the assembly. How those are appointed is up to the mayor to make an appointment and the assembly make a confirmation. It specifically says the provisions regarding compensation and reimbursement that apply to regular board members do not apply. So no mileage, no stipend for a meeting or anything like that. So it's an unpaid position. Of course, if there is staff support, that would be borough employees, in the normal course of their job. Obviously, the clerk would have to advertise the meetings. If they had questions about contract structures, Public Works might have to send somebody, law might have to send somebody. Just depends on what they were doing and what would happen. So there would be some staff support, but the board members themselves, under the way it's written, don't get paid.
thank you. And I think I was thinking particularly about any support from borough staff, because I don't know how big the scope of this thing is going to get, but it seemed to me like it would take a lot of time away from other things to study something which looks to me like, I'm not going to use the word no-brainer because that wouldn't be fair and that wouldn't be nice, but it's like, I don't know why we need to do this. I guess that's just my 2 bits on it. I don't see the point.
Okay, all right, thank you. Assemblymember Hale?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. So I just want to say that I appreciate what Assemblymember 2 is trying to do here. He's kind of looking at, he wants to raise some of these issues, and that's fine. I mean, we can establish the task force, that's fine. But it's not going to be free. Obviously, we have staff support, we have printing costs, we have advertising costs for the meetings, all those kind of things. And then, we already have 2 advisory boards, the Transportation Advisory Board and the Local Road Service Area Advisory Board, the big board. These kind of questions we could put to them. We could direct these 2 boards to take up these very issues, and they could give us these advisory positions. So, you know, I'm not going to oppose this, but I do think that we are kind of doubling well, not necessarily doubling, but half again, the number of boards that we have to look at these things. As far as the composition of the board goes, I support the road service area boards, whatever the resolution that they passed there, saying that they would like to have a member of the road service area, the big board, on this task force. I also think there should be a member of the Transportation Advisory Board on this task force. And as far as the subjects go, one of the things that I would like them to look at is when we're talking about impassable roads, I'd like to have them look at how road service areas can use their own money to improve impassable and substandard roads. Kind of like we had at the last meeting 2 weeks ago, where Mr. Bernier, we added a project to the RIP list in his district that was a substandard road that the RSA wanted to improve, and I think that's definitely a good option for looking at how do we address these substandard roads. Another issue I think that they need to look at is possibly separating the brush cutting from the road service area contracts. I know down in, I think it's in Kenai, they used to have the brush cutting as part of each road service area contract, and they took that out and they made it a borough-wide thing where all the RSAs contributed money, and they had one contractor that went around and did all of the brush cutting for the entire thing. And I hear that they saved a whole bunch of money doing that. Now, I could be wrong, but we should definitely look at separating the brush clearing from the actual maintenance of the roads, you know, the ditching and the plowing and all of those type of things. So that is pretty much all I had to say on the subject. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes.
Thank you.
Members now.
Yeah, Mayor. Yeah, you know, that's where I have a problem with this. Like, not that these aren't serious issues with impassable roads and substandard roads. The T&M, I haven't seen anything that convinces me that's a good idea across the board. So, and I think we just spent a bunch of money in my RSA for T&M. But this impassable substandard roads, some of those issues, those are big issues. But, you know, we have boards that look at this like we're doing an end run around, like we're trying to be efficient up here. We are the steering committee for the borough. We're trying to say what's a priority, where do we spend our time? And we've got boards with a lot of expertise. We have staff with a lot of expertise. We have we've had a task force in the past that's looked at this stuff, and we're looking at putting up to five staff on this. Like, I would like to see that. I mean, that staff would go. They could do work on, plating would love that. Planning would love that. I'm not opposed to a task force, but the way this has come about, like, let's ask those boards for their expertise. Like, I'd like to see the maker of this maybe go back and revise it and just be more specific about what that task force should look at, and get the input from the road service area boards and the tab board. So, you know, we're really focusing on things that we should be focusing on, because the process that this happened with started with proposing T&M. And then we had a few people testify about substandard roads, and all of a sudden we have a task force on substandard roads. And we never asked our experts, you know, what, in addition to these things, what things should we be looking at? And I totally agree with the comment that the substandard roads are not just an RSA 21 issue. So as this is written, I have an issue with it just being an RSA 21. So I'd just like to ask that we go back and get a better detail on what this task force would look like, and also have information presented to us on what we have to date in this category. Let's ask our staff, and our boards for what they, you know, how they see this problem, any other problems they think we should look at. Let's be structured and disciplined about how we direct our staff, because we are the board of directors. And I think it's our job to say, these are the biggest priorities, because there's a ton of them. So that's what I'd like to see on this. Go back and get us a little more information.
Okay, further discussion by the assembly?
Can Assemblyman Yunt go next?
Yeah, go ahead, sir.
Okay, thank you. So in the 3 days following the first time we met about this, I spent 14 hours on the phone with members, mainly people that live out of the Big Lake area. And I took a lot of notes. It was a good experience. I got to learn a lot about their community that I didn't know before, because it's not where I was born and raised. What came out of those 14 hours on the phone for me was that there are a lot of issues out there, and that sticking with status quo is not going to point them out, not going to fix them. Prior to running for office, I served on a task force similar to this as the president of the Mat-Su Home Builders Association. It was to redo our subdivision construction manual that we had been using since 1993. It was a darn good manual. It really was, but it needed some help. It needed some work. I believe we met 26 times for anywhere from 4 to 8 hours at a time. I will tell you, I don't think this road task force is going to be near as involved as that. But what we came out of it with was amazing. All right. We came, the construction manual we're using to build roads right now, I honestly believe is the best one in the state of Alaska. A lot of collaboration, time, energy went into that from people from all walks of life with different professional experiences. And moving forward, it doesn't matter to me who's on the task force. I'm not saying it's none of our business as the assembly, but I want to remind everybody we have a very capable mayor, and I think it should be up to her who goes on it. I appreciate everybody's input, but I want to say, if nobody reports back to me on it anytime soon, I'm fine with that. I'm excited that we're going to have one. I don't like to see all the people shooting the messenger. All the representative is the messenger of the people who put them in office. And I can tell you, I spoke with a lot of people during those 14 hours who are still upset about issues on roads in their community. So whatever comes out of this, I cannot stress this enough. I am, having served on one of these before, I'm in full support of this. I would like to see some of the road maintenance contractors, we have multiple in the valley, I believe they should be asked if they would like to serve, the owners of those, or maybe one of their level, upper management type level people, right? But again, that needs to be the borough mayor that decides that. She's very capable, and I'll leave it at that. So I commend Mogi for bringing issues to the table. I know that we've had a lot of heated debate and a lot of heated comments, but I will tell you what comes out of this, I think, is going to be beautiful. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thank you, sir. Deputy Mayor?
I move to amend the ordinance by adding under section 3, section 4, item 3, a C, area-wide brush cutting, and D, processes to address substandard roads borough-wide.
Okay, should that be in one amendment, or clerk, Madam Clerk, that's okay? Okay. Okay, so I'll have either the deputy mayor repeat. Did everybody online hear the amendment? Does anybody need it repeated? Been able to drop your notes, okay? Mr. Attorney, do you see any problem with the amendment?
Nope.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so discussion now pertains to the amendment only, not to the main ordinance. Discussion on the amendment. Did you want to discuss it, sir?
Yep. Madam Mayor, I'd just like to say that I thought that Assemblymember Hale's recommendations were pretty good. I'd like to see that added on. I do think those things should be looked at as well.
Okay, Stephanie?
These sound like good ideas, but again, I just have a problem with the process. Like, did we we have no input from the road service areas and our tab board on this. So we're just making it up here. So I just haven't, you know, not that they wouldn't agree, but just the process by which we're deciding these are the road issues we're gonna look at and going around our folks. So I don't have a problem with that, but I really think process-wise, we should ask them for input before we move this forward.
Deputy Mayor?
So if I might, Madam Mayor, I suppose it would be redundant to have the RSA boards on this board, because I would imagine whatever work product this board puts out is no doubt going to be commented on by the RSA boards and the big board. So if you want some variety of opinion, you would have an independent task force, because you will almost certainly get advice on whatever the product is from those boards.
All righty. Can I bring you back to the amendment, please? And not the makeup of the task force.
I can't. I do think this speaks to the amendment because we're adding issues to this. You know, again, we're picking the issues. It's the picking of the issues and not asking our experts what they think the issues are that we should look at. So in terms of these particular issues in this amendment, I don't oppose that, but the process by which we're deciding what the issues are that a task force should look at.
Okay, further discussion by the Assembly? Yes.
Can I just call for the question,
Yes, you may.
please?
Okay. Okay, so Assembly Person 2 has called for the question. So we will vote on, is there discussion? No.
Is there any objection?
Oh, is there any objection to the question?
Can I clarify?
Sure.
Just to clarify for the members that aren't familiar with this one, calling the question is to stop debate. It's to stop debate on the primary amendment.
Okay. Your light is, Assembly Person 2, your light is on. Do you still have comments? Thank you, sir. Okay, Madam Clerk, will you go ahead and, didn't hear any objection, so the amendment then is adopted.
No, that was calling the question.
Oh, calling the question. Yeah, you're right. I'm sorry. You're
Now we
right.
need to go to
Yeah.
the vote for the primary amendment.
Okay. So any further discussion, which we cannot have? So, yeah. So the clerk will now take the roll, since we do have people online. For this, the question before you is for adopting the amendment, not the main motion of the task force. Okay, everybody clear with that?
I can go ahead and get members in the room to go ahead and vote. Assemblymember Hale.
Yes.
Assemblymember Yunt.
Yes.
Assemblymember Bernier.
Yes.
It passed unanimously.
Okay, thank you. Now we have before us the ordinance as amended. Any further discussion?
Just one quick
Assembly
comment. I think I have hashed it over, but I would just note that we had a unanimous 13-0 vote by the RSAs suggesting that we not go down this road, and that if we did, we include them in. So I will be unable to support it this time.
Okay. Further discussion? Okay, Madam Clerk, would you take the roll?
I can get the assembly members in the room to go ahead and vote on the main motion. Assemblymember Yunt.
Yes.
Assemblymember Bernier.
Yes.
Assemblymember Hale.
Yes.
It passed with Assemblymember McKee and now is opposed.
Okay, so that legislation now has passed. I'll give you a minute to finish. Get everything back in order. Okay. And so then we have a public hearing on the next.
Participation.
Oh, this
This is
one,
the one that
one
got
pulled.
pulled.
Okay. For any of you that have the ordinance 22-021, we pulled that earlier, and that one is set for public hearing on the 15th of March. Okay, everybody okay there? Okay. Next item is audience participation. We do have a long list, so I will take and ask those people who signed up to testify first, and then we'll take the room and of course those online. Okay, so Ed Money.
Assembly members, my name's Ed Mooney. I live in Big Lake. I figured this place was packed. But anyway, I came here today. I'm concerned about this task force and the RSA 21. A lot of people that I've talked to know very little about it. Everybody's read it, about it on Facebook. But I wanted to come here and perhaps one of the assembly members can enlighten me on what it's all about, as well as the task force.
I'm sorry, sir, we don't have interaction, but the task force ordinance was just passed by the assembly. So that is current legislation now.
A lot of people don't know what it is. They don't know what it's about.
Yeah.
So I didn't know, but what maybe somebody could.
I see our public works.
May I speak to this? This is Jens.
Well,
May
we've had.
I
this.
answer his question?
Yes, go ahead, sir. I'm
Sir, we
trying not-
appreciate you coming in. I don't think any of us know exactly how the task force is going to go yet. We'll have to depend on the mayor and staff and everyone moving forward to help set it up. And I would encourage you to possibly throw your name in the hat as someone that may want to serve on it. Or even if not, then like I said, just follow the public process moving forward. And I do believe in my heart that the mayor will do a great job of setting up the task force. So that's all I got.
Okay. And I see one of our staff is giving you the information. Now, the information he gave you will not include the amendment that was made. And I'm sure if you reach out to the clerk's office, you'll be able to get that amendment, so you will know exactly what was passed, sir. And you're welcome to call me anytime or the attorney. I see he's left the room now, but you can still call him. So, okay, thank you. David Franker. David, Fraker.
He said no.
No, okay. Mike Shields again, sir?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the Assembly. Rather than being, off the cuff, I'm going to read a letter to you. It's one that was passed at the big board meeting on February 17th. Am I on or, yeah, must be on. Dear Assembly members and manager, members of this board representing all 16 RSAs are very disturbed, appalled may be the better term, by an Assembly action taken late in the February 1st regular meeting. While preparing to vote on approval of the RSA Board's road improvement project list for fiscal year 2023, Assembly Member 2 abruptly substituted his personal Big Lake RIP list, previously rejected by the RSA Board, for the board's list, which had already been approved by the board, their road superintendent, and the Big Lake Community Council in public meetings. Mr. 2 offered no explanation or justification for this maneuver. What is more disturbing is that none of the rest of you requested that kind of information. It looked very much like a done deal, judging by post-meeting discussion in the lobby. The Road Service Area Board now requests an Assembly reconsideration of its unquestioning acceptance of Mr. 2's personal RIP list and will fully support any effort by the Big Lake RSA Board to reinstate its publicly approved list. While a maneuver like this might very rarely be appropriate, it should never occur without reasoned justification being presented and a chance to hear public reaction prior to voting. We hope you, as the voters in this particular instance of a rubber stamp sort, will agree. Again, passed by unanimous vote of the big board, 14-0. That's it.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, thank you. Andrew Truxell again, sir?
I mainly came here tonight to speak on this. I'm Andrew Traxler. I'm here to speak on 2022 AM 011. This is where we're bringing back up the Big Lake RIP list. I came here today mostly just to give information. So this is the information that I have to give you. We have 6 roads that we're dealing with. So we have 5 that are impassable, and we have 1 that is mostly passable. This is the difference between the 2 RIP lists. So I drove these roads today and then counted the residents or the developed properties by satellite. Echo Lake Road has 2 full drivable lanes today. It can be plowed and maintained to the best of my understanding of the contract. It's winged, it's plowed, nice road from what it looks like. 72 developed properties on this road. 2 lakefront subdivisions are being serviced by it. Seems like a nice gravel road according to what the road standard is in Big Lake, what we have. It has had mud mats mowed on it some years. Now we will move on to the 5 impassable roads that Moki has put onto the RIP list that has received more funding than what the RSA board has approved. Papoose Twins Road is a single lane in many spots, blind hills and curves, cannot be plowed, maintained to contract requirements, 54 developed properties on it, 3 lakefront subdivisions. It's had up to a half mile of mud mats most every year, except last spring. Has a sign at the beginning of the road that says 4x4 only, travel at your own risk. Pond Lily and Thompson is next on the list. It's 1 1/4 to 1.5 lanes today. Mostly you can plow it to the contract limits. It has a blind hill on it that is 1.5 lanes, 6 developed properties on it. It has mud mats installed most every year. Melosi Hot Springs Road is 1 1/4 lanes today. It has 9 developed properties on it. Cannot be maintained to contract requirements. It has a blind curve, and it gets mud mats on it most every year. Arctic Turn Lane, 1 lane, 9 developed properties, looks like a driveway pretty much. Cannot maintain to contract requirements, has mud mats most every year. So the difference between these 2 RIP lists is the RSA board wants to fund $125,000 to the 5 roads that get mud mats consistently every year. And $500,000 to Echo Lake Road that gets mud mats sometimes. It has 2 lanes on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Diane Ramstead?
Hello, Assembly. Greetings. My name is Diana Ramstad, Ramstad, and I am reading a letter from Ginger Longany, who is a Big Lake resident. My apologies if I don't get her last name right. This is to address the misuse of power Assemblyperson 2 has forced on the Big Lake community. As a longtime Big Lake resident, I'm deeply concerned about how our Assembly representative has blatantly disregarded the RIP list requested by the community after several public meetings and submitted his own RIP list without support of the board or community. I assumed RSA boards were created for the will of the people and to eliminate any one individual's ability to unilaterally submit their own taxpayer-funded project list impacting it quite a bit. There are presently over 80 homes that use Echo Lake Road. I live off of Echo Lake Road, and I've recently developed a large parcel of property with many homes built that feed into Echo Lake Road that use Echo Lake Road. It definitely qualifies for being paved. It has been on the list off and on for over the years, but once again has been removed by Mr. Two. I question his ethics and as how this is representative of the people in the community. Clearly, several members of the community have stood up and spoken out against his agenda of the past few months. I encourage you to please take a hard look at what Assembly Member 2 has done and use reconciliation action if the chance allowed. Respectfully, Ginger Longany. And again, I'd like to point out that I am reading a letter from her, and I'm going to submit this. Thank you.
Mhm. Thank you. Okay, Craig Stewart.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name's Craig Stewart. I happen to be primary for RSA 21. I'd like to read a few things here about the Big Lake project. RSA 21 crafted the original RIP list over 3 meetings with lots of community input from over 40 people at each meeting with unanimous approval of the list. The Big Lake Community Council supported the original RSA 21 RIP list with a resolution. Please do not disenfranchise the citizens of Big Lake. Restored original RSA 21 RIP list as presented. Items on the original RIP list, items 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 are all roads with small populations under 6 to 20 homes and have spots impassable a few weeks a year. Each of these have sections that need muck removed, fabric put down, and gravel installed along with some ditch work to remove water from the road area. Each project was listed under $25,000, so work could be done without full engineering and Davis-Bacon wages. RSA 21 affected almost 2 miles of Twin Papoose doing this the last year. Going out for engineering on these low-traffic roads will exceed the cost of doing the project in this manner. These projects are lumped in with Twin Papoose for $400,000. How will the money be allocated to the small road projects? Will most of it go to Twin Papoose? And besides that, I'd like to relay a little story. I was at a fair, standing in line for a snow cone or something. 3 teenagers crowded to the middle of the line. And so they were smirking and so on. They got to the front of the line. The kids selling the product told them once they got there, you got to go to the end of the line. They were pissed. And but that kid had moral fiber. He wasn't going to put up with it. I ask you to come up to the standard collectively, to the standard that that teenage kid selling snow cones or whatever it was had at the Renaissance Fair. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, sir. Betty?
Hi. My name is Betty Beers. And Moki, 18 years ago, when I was on the assembly, you alerted me to some fraud and theft that was taking place at Public Works. You and I worked really well together. And between the assembly and the administration and you and me, we got that fixed. And I was glad to work with you and gave you my full support. But on the Big Lake community supported RIP list, I must side with the RSA board and the community council. They want a fair process, and it doesn't look like to them it is. And that's major in this issue. It's not just totally the roads. It was how the list was substituted without anybody really knowing and couldn't comment. And it doesn't make sense to me to allocate $400,000 to just a few roads with very little residents, even though they're impassable, because there's a lot of impassable roads and everybody wants their roads fixed. But the process has to be fair. And when you're on it, you expect, you percolate up to the top and eventually your road is going to get fixed. Mr. Sumner, as our deputy mayor, we look to you for additional guidance and assistance, balancing the Big Lake community concerns versus one assembly member's agenda. Big Lake is a very engaged community, as you probably all know by now, and recently had over 400 petition signers on your T&M issue. They're asking you, the assembly, for additional help to restore the original RIP list, restore the fair process, restore the faith in government that it really is from the bottom up, not top down, where you can do anything, support anybody, and the people who live there have to live with the consequences. Everybody wants their roads fixed. They all want it fixed now. And I understand that. But we're just asking that you restore the process of fairness. You've heard from the people. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Terry?
Madam Mayor, Assembly folks, usually I come with lots of notes and everything else, so I'm going to kind of ad lib this. But, first, I don't very often wear this cap. It's kind of emotional because it belonged to a 9/11 individual. And tonight I wore it specifically because I wanted to be able to take it off to Dee McKee, who tonight listened, heard, helped, and has facilitated a lot of folks that needed some help. And I looked at everybody else and wonder, here we have 2,800 folks in Big Lake, okay? And I would say, if you look at the petition and if you look at all the folks that have written in and all the folks that have talked, it's somewhere probably close to 500-600 people. That's 21% of Big Lake has come and said, please don't replace this RIP list. Don't allow this to happen. All these other things have been set up. I mean, you have Assemblyman McKee, who sees the big picture, has had an opportunity recently to see the Big Lake Comprehensive Plan, understands the Matanuska Comprehensive Plan, sees that the original folks that put the RSA list together saw that, have been working towards saying, okay, great, there's some subdivisions, 2 subdivisions being planned in Echo Lake. There's nothing being planned on these 5 roads. Let's get Echo Lake done, and then other places will have additional things. So of those 5 roads we've had, and I'll give it a large number. We've probably had somewhere between 50 to 56 people come and maybe speak the other direction, saying, oh, no, this other list is great. Let's do this. Let's work just on Impassable Roads. Let's put all the money there. All the money that's invested in Echo Lake Road. Just don't worry about it. That's 2%. Okay. Now, if we look at the big picture, 108,000 people in the Mat-Su Valley, we're looking, the total amount is 0.5%. Big Lake makes up about 0.5% of the whole valley, but it's you folks' responsibility to protect us. It really is. And so my question is how much more than 21% needs to come and say, we need help? This is not right. So if you guys can tell me that, either send me an email or hand signals or however it's supposed to go, I can then be as proud of you folks as I am of Assembly McKee this evening. And it's just, I could go into telling that all the other folks prior to the current RSA group how much energy they put in there. Now we know, based on what's going to happen tonight, the other third member of the RSA has dropped out. So Assemblyman 2 has hand-selected another individual to go on to the RSA 21 board. In conjunction, he wants to expand the board to 5 people. So he'll be able to pick an additional folks, 4 people. We're never going to get it ever again to be able to have the RIP list the way it should be, at least tonight. Put it back to the way it originally was and let those folks at least feel that you guys helped them out. I really appreciate your time. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Okay, Dan Mayfield.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Assembly. First off, I want to thank Assemblymember McKee for bringing up an amendment to something that was previously adopted. Thank you very much. Over the past month and a half, maybe more, it seems like time flies, I have been attempting to bring the wishes of Big Lake, the Big Lake community in particular, to the Assembly and try to appeal to your sense of obligation towards that community. And it honestly hasn't seemed to work. We have found some support, and I'm truly thankful for that. But so tonight, I thought I would try something a little bit different and talk to you maybe about RSA tax dollars. There are 2,744 homes in the Big Lake area, according to the last numbers we have. And every single one of those homes, regardless of whether they live on an RSA road or not, pay RSA taxes. And obviously, that's a lot of money. Not a fortune, but it's a lot of money. And we use a certain amount of that money to pay for the contract, to maintain roads, and then we have some money left over, approximately $650,000, to take care of projects in the area. So the original list, it's always been the philosophy of the RSA board to try to spread that money out among the community as much as possible, have the most people benefit from that money. And that was reflected in this original list, the list that was approved by the RSA and by the community council. And so now we have a substitute that Assemblymember 2 brought forward that gives the benefit to 5 roads. The original list gave the benefit to 19 roads. So, and in his substitute, $400,000 is going to 5 roads. That is 60% of the available money that's available, that is available to the RSA to pay for roads. So, and you've already heard some numbers tonight. I think there were 70 some odd, 78 homes on these 5 roads. To summarize, 2,744 homes are paying for 78 homes. That simply is not fair. It's 2.8% of our homes that are getting a benefit from this change that Mr. 2 has put forward with your concurrence. Thank you.
Thank you. Jacob, and I'm not sure. I'll ask forgiveness now, for at least I didn't butcher it, but.
Try. Snedeker.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you for letting me speak here. Be as brief as possible. I am on Impassable Road, and I think that the RSA board has thoroughly agreed that it's one of the top 5 worst roads. It's 1 mile long. It's actually 2 roads combined, Tofson and Pond Willie. There are years that we can't get out other than with a swamp buggy. And I've lived there 13 years and I paid a lot of taxes. I've got a nice piece of property back there, built a house. There are times that I would tell my wife, well, just don't go out today. I really appreciated the gentleman who was talking about the snow cone guys. I have worked my way on that list over the last 13 years. I know a lot of the RSA people, Moki. I've been there before a lot of them were on the board and before Moki was an assembly member. I'm on that list and there's just a pittance of money for my road. Obviously, I think it should be more, but I want to make sure that effort that I put in isn't wasted because of whatever agendas are going on. I mean, you understand them better than I do. The bottom line is I have purchased a piece of property. I've built a home. I cannot get down my road in the spring. And there's been times, in fact, one time a fire engine got stuck when it went to put out a fire, and boy, that section of road got cleared up. When we're really talking about it, it's not even a mile. It might be a third of a mile, maybe a half a mile. A lot of people know better than I what it would take. I'm pretty experienced with construction and road building. It's not that much. I don't want to be kicked to the back of that line when I sat in it for the last 13 years. And so I'm just imploring you. I've done my due diligence. I don't know what other tools I have other than, this is my first assembly meeting to come to say, well, what in the bloody hell should I do? And so I'm putting that to you. My road is Pond Lily I'm at the end of the road. And there are times that we don't get out. I mean, I generally get out because I got to go to work to pay for it, but that's with a 4-wheel drive buggy or whatnot. So anyways, I thank you for your time. You guys got a tough job ahead of you because there's a lot of people that want their roads done. I'd like to be somewhere on that list and not at the back of it. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Gerald Dewhurst.
Madam Mayor, you did great with the pronunciation.
Okay, good. Thank you. I get to go home tonight, right?
Madam Mayor and Assembly, thank you for doing the job you do. I know it's not always easy. It's difficult. But I think one of the things that you do as we do as citizens is you listen to the people that bring the message to you. So I'm going to ask you a question. We've had a transportation advisory board. We have a board for the road service area. We have a community council in Big Lake. This isn't just one person coming, talking to you. You in our community put these boards together. You chose intelligent, you've chosen quality people, and these quality, intelligent people have given you a list. This was not done in the last 2 weeks. This has been going on for years. This list, of course, nobody wants to be on the last of the list. There's no one. I mean, I'd have to be crazy to say I wanted to be on the last of the list. But this list was done with a lot of effort, a lot of input, and quality people. I ask you, think about that list. That list is very important to many people, not only our family, but other families. And I think you'll make a great decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else that would like to participate? Yes, hi, Elizabeth, come forth.
Good evening. My name is Esther Huddleston, and I wanted to comment on AM 22-014. You have rules and regulation to prevent conflict of interest and corruption. And I don't see how it's right for the borough to make exceptions for one individual. If you have a problem with MSB 2-71-090, maybe you should make changes to where the rules and regulation applies to everyone. And also, a few weeks back, I was at the Planning Commission, and it was on the recommendation to repeal the outdoor shooting facility ordinance. A lot of the people that were there in support of the ordinance were complaining about their next door neighbor shooting on the private property. And the outdoor shooting facility ordinance does not apply to the person that's shooting on their private property. There was a gentleman there at the meeting. He had a recording of his neighbor shooting on their private property, and he said that he could hear the shooting over his tractor. Well, you couldn't hear his tractor running in the recording. And you have the outdoor shooting facility ordinance at noise restriction at 90 decibels. And a farmer's tractor is louder than 90 decibels. A household vacuum cleaner is at 90 decibels. And you can't even have a shotgun range in the Matsu Borough because a shotgun is 150 decibels. And also the outdoor shooting facility ordinance gives the power to the Planning Commission to revoke a permit at any time. And nobody's going to take the time and the money to build a shooting facility if they know that they can have it just pulled over a political issue, over a complaint. And you have a dog mushing ordinance. It has no restriction on noise from dog teams. And I feel like that it's not a good ordinance. And people say it's not a Second Amendment issue, but if you can't go to a place to have classes and have a safe place to shoot, then it is a Second Amendment issue because you're no longer able to exercise that Second Amendment issue. And I believe that if we have more shooting ranges, then you'll have less complaints because people won't be complaining about their neighbor shooting on their private property because then they would have a range to go to shoot. And in the state of Alaska requires our youth to have a hunting education course. Well, we need a youth shooting range so our youth will have a place to go and learn gun safety, learn their hunting education, have a sport opportunity. We have.
Thanks, Esther. Anyone else that would like? Yeah, come on, Lynn.
Good evening and thank you. My name is Lynn McCabe. I live on one of the Impassable Roads. And contrary to what you may have read in the Frontiersman, we did never ask for special favors just because my husband's our representative. We have been going to the RSA meetings for quite some time. And we have seen some improvements on our road, which is Papoose Twins, over the years with the squeaky wheel gets the grease. If you don't show up there, your road doesn't get any attention. So I don't remember exactly when it was, but there was one meeting in Big Lake at the road service area meeting where we had over 50 people present. You can tell there's a lot of contention in Big Lake. There's a lot of issues and there will never be enough money to fix all the problems we have, never. But what we've learned, and I don't know what the date was of this, the borough took over our road from the state. And our road has never been brought up to borough standards. So what are we supposed to do? How do we address that besides plugging money into it from the RSA? One of the things that was mentioned at the big meeting, which has never come to any kind of fruition, was a matrix that could be applied to all the road service areas, which would give them a uniform standard for how you determine which road gets the attention first. How many lives have to be lost on a road that's impassable? How much money is that worth? I'm not asking for anybody to address my road. There are other roads out there that are probably worse than ours. So I know you have a hard decision to make, and I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Lynn. Anyone else? Okay, Caleb, do we have people online? All right, go ahead. First person online, please.
Hello, can you hear me? This is Mike Szymanski.
Yeah, we hear you, Senator.
Thank you very much, Senator. I am addressing the issue of the RIP list that was presented by Assemblyman 2 in lieu of the original list that was presented by the Road Service District in, God, I don't know how many years it's been. I haven't been involved in politics in so many years, I can't remember how long it was. You probably remember better than I do. But it seems to me that I got pulled into this because I live out in Big Lake. I originally came to Big Lake in 1958 with my brothers and sisters, and I live on basically an island. I pay for my own road maintenance. I'll call it ice roads. But I believe in the public system, and that public system or process that we have is that Road Service District, RSA, develops a list and prioritize it based on public input. And where I'm disturbed tonight is that when my Assemblyman too offers up a list without public process to substitute it for a list of priorities that were developed by the community, it is disheartening and it's really disgusting to me to see it happening. Now, Lynn McCabe talked about living out Papoose. I understand that. And I understand my other neighbors that live in the area. I own other property in the area, multitude of lots that could be serviced if they were brought up higher on the priority list. But I just don't see it. I don't understand why all of a sudden the Assemblyman from my area now has substituted a list without public process. I was told not to say this, but it reminds me of a guy in Russia, Putin, who decided that he's got a process that he wants to invoke. It's just not right. It's plain and simple against the process that we live by. The RIP list that was developed by my community should be followed, not by an Assemblyman who just unilaterally injects his will over the power of the rest of the public out there. And again, let me emphasize it. I live basically on an island. I drive from that on ice roads to the state roads. I don't count on the RIP list providing assistance directly to me. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. The next person online, please.
Hi, my name is Kyle Nelson. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
I'm neighbors with Jake, who spoke earlier. This is my first time being on one of these, and I've been trying to get a little more involved the past year, so there's a lot that I don't know as far as fundings, the RIP list, things of that nature. And I was approached, or I had Mookie come to my place the other day talking about increased fundings being allotted for our road, which I don't know if that meant our road, which is Toston, Pond Lily, or, all the roads on this list. But I just want to voice, as far as our road is a very bad road, but I do understand there are a lot of roads that are very bad. So I hope, the monies that are out there do get split up accordingly, and we just don't jump ahead of other people. But it is much appreciated when he came over talking about monies that he was trying to get to our road. With everything I've heard now, I guess that may not have been the right way to go about it. So I hope everything is done properly, and I thank you for my time.
Thank you. Caleb, we have another person. Okay, thank you. Go ahead online.
Yeah, it's Steve Edwards again. Guess I get a second shot at this different subject. The OR 2200, no, 002, I believe it is. Yeah, the gravel pit. I testified that at the Planning Commission last night, and I'm assuming they're going to make a recommendation to you, but I don't see, I haven't heard anything that tells me what problem we're trying to fix with this ordinance. We've had the 2,000 yards for many years, and working with the road service areas, we seem to be able to access gravel to our needs. So I don't see a need for increasing this to 20,000 yards for under an exemption. I'm not a huge fan of exemptions anyway, because also a member of the community council, and I know we had a problem with a large gravel pit going into the residential neighborhood there that wasn't fitting with that area. And so we wouldn't want that to happen without the public process. So I'm opposed to 22002 for those reasons. Thank you.
Thank you. We have another person online? No. Last chance for anyone here would like to testify. We are under audience participation, so it can be any item. Doesn't have to be an item that's on the agenda or going to be on a future agenda. Anything you would like to bring attention to the assembly. Okay, don't see anything else. Then I'll close audience participation. And we are at the consent agenda. I know there were some things pulled earlier. One thing, okay. So, Madam Clerk, would you read the items that still remain then, I guess, in the consent agenda,
I
please?
sure will. Resolution 22024, a resolution authorizing the borough manager to enter into an agreement with the Matt Valley Milling for the Alsop A timber sale. Resolution 22025, a resolution to waive Matt-Subro landfill fees for the Alaska State Adopt a Highway program for fiscal years 2022 and 2023. AM 22013, approval of contract amendment with Harris Consulting to extend the contract to June 30th, 2023 in an amount not to exceed $80,400 per year for state lobbyist services.
Okay. Deputy Mayor?
I move to approve the consent agenda as read into the record by the clerk.
Okay, is there any objections? Okay, hearing none, then the consent agenda is approved. And now we have some.
We do have one item that was pulled, and that is AM 22014, excuse me, approving a waiver under MSB 2.71090 for former Assembly Member Tamara Bovee to accept employment with Valley Community for Recycling Solutions without impact to any of the agreements or activities between Valley Community for Recycling Solutions and the borough, and this was pulled by Assembly Member McKee.
Okay, would you like to address? Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I would like to address that. I think.
You need to move.
What do I do?
See, I move to adopt AM 22013.
And then you can discuss it.
So if I say I move to adopt it, then
But
that
you can
means I
still
like it.
speak against it.
You can still speak against it.
I can speak against it by adopting it.
Yeah.
All right, let's do that.
All motions have to be in the positive.
Okay, so tell me what words to say. I move to adopt
Yeah, you move to adopt
AM 22014.
AM 22014.
Okay, already now you can address it.
Thank you. I'm kind of a stickler for law, excuse me, Nick, but I do realize that this is written in a way that allows the assembly in its sole discretion to approve waivers, exceptions to this law. But it makes me nervous when we do something like that, because if I approve it for you, then I feel I have to approve it for you and you and you. I don't, when you start making exceptions to the rule, then the exceptions become the rule. And it's pretty hard to defend saying no to one person and yes to someone else. So that bothers me. When you make exceptions to the law, it begins to fray at the edges. And after a while that works its way in. So it's like, if you're going to have a law, that restricts people from accepting employment for 1 year, then that's kind of the way it ought to be. This is absolutely nothing against Tambovie. I think she would be absolutely excellent. I've long history for me with VCRS. I piloted their recycling program for all the schools. So, and I think with her passion, enthusiasm, she was always here. And I think she would be absolutely primo for the job, but I don't understand why. Well, let me say this. If I were hiring, and I've hired a lot of people, and I saw that somebody had borough assembly experience, I'd say, yeah, that's going to do that person some good. And that might boost that person over somebody else who doesn't have that expertise or that experience and that access to the borough. And when you're talking about any kind of money, and we are, because we're talking about grant money, that would be really big for me as a person making a hiring decision to hire that person. Having said all that, I hope Tambovie gets a job. But what I really would like to see is they would say, you know what, this kind of violates public trust, because public trust says we don't think that we want any of our folks benefiting from community service that they've done in having a position like this. So if I were those folks at VCRS, I would say, you know what, we really like your style, but we got to wait a little bit longer. Maybe appoint, I'm not telling them how to run their business, but maybe appoint an acting director or somebody like that, which would then meet the letter of the law. So it's a protest vote against the exception to a rule that was put into place to assure that the public could have trust in government, which a lot of times the public has difficulty with trust in government for good reason. And so I just think that it violates the integrity of the purpose and our desire to have the public place their trust in us. So it's a protest vote against the process, not the person, just like you can understand that. And that's pretty much all I have to say about it.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Mayor, did you have?
Yeah, so I guess what I'd say is that I sponsored an amendment that amended this section of our code in 2019 to include sitting assembly members, whereas previously it had not been forbidden for a sitting assembly member to contract with the borough. And my intent was not necessarily that it should be completely forbidden, but that there should always be public notice that that sort of thing is happening. So I might point out that we previously granted Assembly Member Hale an exemption because he does occasionally work for employers that may do work for the Matsu Borough in his capacity as, I believe he's a surveyor. And so we don't want to unnecessarily restrict who can serve on the assembly, but we do want, I believe, the public to know these things. So I think that the code is serving its purpose, and I don't really see a reason to sort of unnecessarily withhold employment from Tambovie simply because she was on the assembly.
Thank you. Assemblyperson Hale, you have comments?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to kind of echo what Deputy Mayor was saying. I do dirt work. I do heavy civil construction. I'm a surveyor and a heavy equipment operator. And pretty much, every year, I will work on a project that is being funded by borough money. And so, I applied for this exemption, and the Assembly in their wisdom granted it to me because I don't have anything to do with the bidding. I don't have anything to do with the procurement of the work that we do. And I see this position that Mrs. Bovie is trying to secure as basically the same thing. This is a non-issue to me. I think this is absolutely something that we should waive in this case, and I would urge folks to vote yes.
Okay. Yes.
Just say
Assemblyperson Hours?
I agree with the previous two speakers.
Okay. Further discussion by the Assembly? Mhm. Nobody else, right? Okay, so the motion before you is to adopt AM 22-014. And are you ready for people to vote, Madam Clerk?
If I can get everybody in the room to go ahead and vote on the action or the AM, please. Assemblymember Bernier,
Yes.
Assemblymember Hale,
Yes.
Assemblymember Yunt.
Yes.
It passed with Assemblymember McKee opposed.
Okay, thank you. Now, that takes care of everything that we have. Now we're back to the introductions for public hearing. Okay, the next item on our agenda is the introductions for public hearing set for March 15th. And Madam Clerk, would you read the items into the record, please?
I will. That would be Ordinance 22001, Ordinance 22002, Ordinance 22024 with accompanying resolution 22026, Ordinance 22025 with accompanying resolution 22026, Ordinance 22027 accompanying resolution 22028, Ordinance 22028 with accompanying resolution 22029, Ordinance 22029, and Ordinance 2230.
Okay. Deputy Mayor, would you move, please?
I move to introduce the legislation as read into the record by the clerk and set the public hearings for March 15th, 2022.
Is there any objection? All right, I'm sorry, any discussion? Is there any objection? Hearing none, and the legislation is introduced. The next item is the vacancy report. Deputy Mayor?
I move to confirm the mayor's recommendations as follows. Historic Preservation Commission, Janet Kincaid. Local Emergency Planning Committee, Renee Dillo. Big Lake RSA number 21, resignation of Greg Quinton, Jill Parson.
Okay, is there any discussion? Any objection? Okay, hearing none, then the vacancy report has been approved. The next item on our agenda is a motion to amend something previously adopted. We are at the motion to amend something previously adopted. Madam Clerk, would you read the legislation into the record?
Approval of road service area road improvement project list for 2022.
Okay, the main motion has already been adopted. This is just a motion to amend, and that is all that will be acted upon. Assemblymember McKee, do you have a motion to amend?
Yes, I do. I move
Okay.
to amend. Oh, I can speak to it now?
You can move your motion right now.
Okay, thank you. As I indicated in the motion, in deference to the Board of Supervisors, it has been practically, I would say 95% or more of the people that have appeared here tonight have said, we need to rely on the expertise of the people that we have that are out there, that's their job. I think that to substitute something that, am I not supposed to?
You can't start debating until you
Oh.
actually place the motion on the
I
floor.
placed the motion on the floor.
Go ahead and read this.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I'm a newbie at this, so you'll have to forgive me. Excuse me. I move to amend AM 22-011, which was previously adopted on February 15, 2022, by replacing the Big Lake RSA RIP list with the list as adopted by the Big Lake RSA Board of Supervisors, and the RIP list is attached to this amendment.
Okay,
Thank you.
now is there any discussion? So now you can discuss your motion.
Yes. Okay. Kind of to reiterate what I wasn't supposed to have said. I do, the expertise is out there. I've had calls from a lot of folks who have said, the reason we're here is to make these decisions, and they're made by different people at several different levels. I've had one person said, I'm an engineer and so is my wife, or even I'm an engineer and so is my husband. So these folks are put out there to do this very thing that they did. And the unanimity of it is stunning. I spoke to one gentleman today I told him I thought that his best shot would be to actually work with the RSAs to have a bigger influence. And if, that's kind of like a democracy out there. The majority wins. You got a better way to do it. You got to prove to the majority that your way is better. And if you can't do that, then you got to fold them and go home. So I don't understand why we would not accept their original RIP list. They're the folks in the trenches on the ground doing the work. And I just defer to their judgment. That's really pretty much, where I stand on that. I was interested in the thing about Davis-Bacon because I've worked on projects where Davis-Bacon was in effect. I thought that was interesting. There's another thing too, and I hate to say this is going to get me in trouble, but I've said it before pretty much. When you choose to live off the grid, you got to go along with what happens off the grid. The folks that are more in the core area are going to get, because there's more traffic, more use, you're going to get more attention. If I live off the grid, I automatically have an opportunity cost. It says I live out in the boondocks. My opportunity cost is I don't get all of the attention. I don't get all of the road work. But that's okay with me because I live in my own paradise. And when you have an opportunity cost, it has to be made in an informed way. And then you can't go back and say, oh, shucks, now I want it all. I'd probably be screaming for my road to be fixed as well. But I would, in this case, I just think would have to defer to the folks out there that made the decision in the first place. They have expertise, knowledge, experience, and they're volunteering. My gosh, the number of hours that these folks put in. I've heard stories. So that's pretty much where I am on it.
Okay. Any further discussion by any of the assembly? Yes. Go ahead. Yes. Okay. Assembly person 2, go ahead.
Thank you. I ran for office almost 2 years ago. I'm in my second year now. So as I went out there and I knocked on all the doors in Big Lake, one of the big things they asked for was dust control. They wanted dust control. We have over 80 miles of gravel roads out there, really kind of substandard gravel roads. And it is actually a party place. So in the weekends, it gets to be a lot more traffic. I don't know if you guys have all seen the side-by-sides, and the four-wheelers and motorcycles. Well, they just love Big Lake. So that makes more dust. They asked me to do something about the dust. The first year I had to fight and put calcium chloride on the RIP list. The second year, again, I had to fight, but now they came up with a new strategy to get me not to put the calcium down. And that would be to ask for an environmental impact study on the Big Lake roads for calcium chloride. I don't know how many studies have been done in America, but I guarantee it's thousands. We've been putting calcium salt down on the roads every year. I mean, that's what it goes. So then we had a meeting here probably, I don't know, let's say half a year ago, maybe a year ago. And there was, and Lynn McCabe, she kind of talked about it. There was over 50 people there. And those 50 people weren't called on the phone. So it was a selected group. This were flyers that I put up around the community and said, come on in and talk to me, and let me make sure that I'm going in the direction you want to go. So what the big thing was on the roads there was impassable roads. They yelled it from the ceiling. There was no doubt that they wanted their impassable roads fixed. That's what they wanted. They elected me. I'm going to do what they asked. So last year, I changed the RIP list. They were only allowed $25,000 or $24,000 for some of those roads. It didn't fix any of the roads. So what I would say is imagine a road with 4 potholes that swallow your truck. So we fix half a pothole. You still can't get down the road. I don't think there's a person in here that wants to be responsible for somebody dying because the ambulance can't get to their house. We definitely had a house burn up because the fire truck couldn't get there. I feel very compelled to give the people what they asked for, It seems very straightforward. They're not asking for a paved road. They're asking to have emergency services be able to go to their house. What's wrong with that? Maybe I should neglect that and say, let's go pave another road instead. We want to save that guy a car wash, I guess. So that's what I would say about this whole RIP list thing. It's already been approved twice, and it came up again now. I feel very confident in what I'm doing. I think that things are changing. We need to listen to the people and not selected groups. That's all I got to say.
Assemblyperson Nowers?
Thank you, through the mayor. I don't think Assembly Member 2's ever been unconfident. Road service areas, I've had that done more on road service areas in my term on assembly than almost anything else. And I've lived on an impassable road. I lived on a road that in the spring was jello, you jump on it and the passenger would get out and make sure the car could get through where you were going. You weren't going to sink into it. A couple of points I want to make. People said, don't you hear the wishes of the community? Well, I have two thoughts about that. One is the wishes of the community. Mr. 2 was elected. My other thought is this balancing of roads. Who should get it? Like what I hear is, and I'm not in this area, I hear you have a lot of people that if you pave a road, maybe you got more money left that you don't have to maintain that you can fix up these other roads. The other hand, you got impassable roads. How do you resolve that? And that's kind of where I'm at on this. I think it was Jack back there who lived on Lily Pond or Pond Lily. And, he said, I want to know where I am in the process. So, what's the process if the assembly decides we're just not going to follow what the RSAs advise? We're not going to, one thing you could do is if somebody calls you, you send them through the RSA board. So, everybody's on the same page. And I just don't know how, somebody like Jack, if it's just up to the assembly member and who's in there, he might get the snow cone this time, but he may find out in a couple of years somebody else gets to jump to the front of the line. So I guess as assembly member, this has gone beyond the RSA 21. It's affected all the RSAs. I'm hearing from RSAs down in District 2. And as assembly member, what are we telling people about the process? So if you have an issue, who do you go to? Do you use the process that the clerk would tell you about and the attorney would tell you exists for the borough, or do you just go to your assembly member? And that's where I have a problem with. I think part of our job is making sure people know the process and they're clear on that.
Assemblyperson Hale?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. One comment, and that is that, if we start short circuiting the process that these things follow, that's not just a Big Lake issue. That makes the entire borough look bad. And so I think that the snow cone metaphor was quite apt. If we start jumping other projects in front of line when other folks have been waiting patiently for their turn, that looks bad on the entire borough. And that's all I had to say.
Okay. Further discussion by the assembly. And Deputy Mayor?
Through the mayor to the manager, I guess I might have some questions on this. So the RIP list as amended shows total funded as $615,000, and the RSA's RIP list shows total funded as $270,000, leaving fund balance. So some of the projects mentioned, like this Echo Lake Road, show there is funding currently unavailable. Would that have been funded even though it shows as funding currently unavailable, or how would that remaining fund balance have been dispersed?
I'll take a shot at it while Mr. Dolan moves to the front of the room. But as I recall, there's about just shy of $700,000 in the RSA 21 fund, or in that account. The issue is when they started this process of developing the RIP list, if you recall, there were a couple of contract approvals the assembly had to take up. One got pulled and one got voted down. So that did not award funding for some contracts for work this past summer that contributes to that fund balance that we're talking about. You got to be real careful here, and Terry can probably say it better than I can. These are estimated funding amounts. The value of the RIP list is that it authorizes staff to go work on certain projects. So it's not intended to be an accounting of the actual fund balance that exists in a road service area. What it's attempted to inform is what funding may be required, for example, to pave a road or to make an improvement. The challenge with the impassable roads is they've been piecemealed and done as spot improvements over the past several years, largely because you don't have enough funding to go in and completely repair it. You certainly don't have enough funding to go in and design and construct it to subdivision construction manual standard. So you go in, you make these spot improvements, you try to do it in the most cost-effective manner possible, and you make it passable, and you chip away at it over time. That's been the strategy for Papoose Twins, for example. I think what Mr. Two's amendment does and what he was trying to communicate with the 400,000 is, and I guess it goes to the pothole analogy, but the issue is we got to fix the road if it's impassable. And if $25,000 is not enough to fix the road, what are you really accomplishing? So I'm gonna pause and see if Terry has anything to add, because he's been doing this a lot longer and has more detail than I do. But that, I just wanted to kind of point those couple things out, because I think folks look at this list and they're like, this is exactly how much money we're going to spend in priority order, when really the intent of this list, as I understand it, is it's the assembly saying, yes, go work on these projects. And then the public works staff takes that and they go and begin to execute on that. And a number of variables factor into what projects might get accomplished first. For example, like right-of-way acquisition. If you have a right-of-way acquisition issue and it takes you a year to work through it, it doesn't mean the project right below it couldn't necessarily continue to progress while you're addressing that issue, for example. So I'm going to pause and see if Terry has anything he wants to add.
Terry Dolan, Director of Public Works. So the borough manager had it exactly right. That document doesn't set priorities and it doesn't establish funding. All it does is the assembly telling us to go and work on those projects. So that dollar amount will change depending on what money is set aside by the assembly for other contracts or other spending that we do for like design work. Sometimes pieces of projects don't come in here because the cost is less than $100,000. But if it's capital work, we'll still deduct it off those amounts. But that dollar amount that's up at the top there is what we expected at the time those would be available at the time those documents were created.
Yes, go ahead, sir.
And then through the mayor, you say it doesn't create a priority list, but quite
does not.
clearly some of them are designated as funded, and then some of them are designated as funding currently
Sure.
unavailable. Is that not some sort of priority list?
So here's an example. When we show you that, what we're telling you is these are the ones we expect to spend money on this year. But the borough manager just gave you a great example. A lot of times we'll run into a problem like a right-of-way issue that can't easily be resolved because the owner of the property doesn't want to sell a piece of it to us. Or sometimes we run into problems with utilities where we can't get a utility company in a timely manner to come out there and move their facilities to the edge of the right-of-way. When those things occur, if there's sufficient funds available to take a project that's below the funded line and begin to execute it, we'll pull that up without ever coming back to the assembly and start to execute it so that the funds that are available in the current year get executed as quickly as they can. We don't sit on a big pile of money and wait for things to happen. Essentially, the theory is that if you're going to tax people and take their money away from them, they should benefit from that as quickly as you can. And so we try to execute it to the full extent we can every year.
Follow up, sir?
This is Assemblyman Yunt. May I speak?
Yes, go ahead, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. So I've spoke about this many times in the past in different on different topics that always comes back to finance. And I think it's awesome that our bond rating was upheld lately. That speaks volumes to the financial discipline that our staff has, right? It was upheld because we have sufficient amount of money in reserves. Okay, and I know finance isn't everybody's background, but that's a good thing. I would like to have these numbers read into the record one more time. I believe what I heard earlier is there was about 700,000, give or take, I didn't write it down, in the RSA, and the RSA board's intent was to spend 200 and something thousand this year. And I've spoke about this in the past, so I'll speak about it again tonight. If that's the case, then we definitely need to add more projects to the list, kind of like Moki's talking about here. The taxpayers do not want, they want a return on investment. They do not want to know that there's $400,000 left in the bank account. Now, I understand we have to do right-of-way acquisition from time to time and other things, but that seems like a really big cushion to me, right? A really big one. And I can tell you that's not the cushion that upheld our bond rating. If the money's there, spend it. Fix these impassable roads. Help the residents of Big Lake out. And I don't see that Moki's trying to take away from any one group. That's not my understanding of this at all. My understanding is he's simply just trying to add a few more groups to it and give the voters and the taxpayers a return on their investment. So can I please have those numbers read into the record one more time as to how much money is available and what the intended original RSA RIP list was going to spend, because it is going to be a determining factor on how I vote.
Yeah, so through the mayor to Mr. Yunt, the account balance for capital is at approximately $700,000 for RSA 21. Because we've been down this road a number of times over the past couple of months. The original RIP list shows you estimates in a general order of how that money could be spent. And I'm going to use the Jolly Creek Basin drainage issue, and Mr. Tu can chime in as well if he would like. But that's an example of a project where we need to go out and do a design to truly determine the scope of work and what's actually going to need to be done to address the drainage problems in that entire basin. We estimate that cost could be over $1 million. So if you actually go out and design that project and you don't develop a balance, you're not going to be able to execute or put that project out to bid. So it really depends on the size of the project that you're talking about. I mean, if you know you're going to go out and bid a $200,000 paving of a road, great. But what we're estimating is 7 figures for this drainage issue. And we know it's going to take time to develop. So, and I don't want to speak for Mr. Tu, but I think one of the intent with his list was to create some capacity to actually award and construct that work once it's designed and engineered. So that would be a perfect example of why you would accumulate funds in the account so that you can fund verify and actually put the work out to bid. Now, I'm not talking about, I don't want to get wrapped around the merit, like, well, should we put impassable roads before the drainage? I mean, that's really a discussion for what we're talking about here and the difference between the two lists. But I don't want folks to get the impression that we are just trying to build fund balances and not execute work, as Mr. Dolan alluded to. But there are some cases where you have a large project, and if you know generally what it's going to cost, you're going to have to develop enough of a balance to be able to execute that at some point. Does that help you?
I appreciate that explanation. It does, yes, sir. So I do appreciate that, and I have not looked at the drainage issues myself specifically, but me personally, I would prioritize impassable roads over drainage. So I think I'm ready to vote. I'll move on. Thanks.
And Assemblyperson Nowers.
Thank you. Through the mayor, just a question for the manager, Public Works Director. So in terms of the question Assemblymember Sumner asked about this kind of being a priority list, there may be projects that are listed in the funded that you can't go forward with because of whatever issue. But in terms of where you would turn next, if you weren't able to expend those funds you would go to the next project on the list. You wouldn't jump to, you would use this kind of as a priority list. Is that fair to say?
Terry Dolan, Director of Public Works. So it depends on the dollar amounts. If, for example, the next project on the list was $1 million project, and I freed up $200,000 by not executing one that was stuck, I might pull one that was further down on the list up if it was in the $200,000 range. So the Assembly, by approving this list, is essentially approving all of these projects for us to work on. And then we work on them in the order that makes sense. We try to do it in the order that it's on there, but sometimes that changes and we don't come back to the Assembly and ask you if we can pull one up that's two down. We just go ahead and pull it up if it makes sense.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that.
Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
Yeah. So through the mayor to, I guess, Director Dolan. So we have on the RSA's list, there's a number of roads: Twin Papoose, Towson, Pond Lily. Can't read that one because it wasn't printed very well. Arctic Turn.
Malosi Hot
And those
Springs.
are all consolidated under one item for 400,000 on the list prior to the proposed amendment. So what would be the effect of that? So if they're all on here on the RSA's list as 25,000, does that cap the amount that you can expend on those to 25,000, whereas the 400,000 has a different effect, or?
No, it does not. It just tells you what we anticipate spending. And the way we have worked on those roads in the past typically is we've had small projects less than $25,000, which keeps the work outside of the Davis-Bacon wage level that you hit after you get above at $25,000. So that allows the RSA to get a lot more for their money. There are sometimes we can't do that if we're having to do engineering and build something that doesn't already exist. State statute requires us to buy engineering for it, and then normally we would be executing under the Davis-Bacon wage rules. But for small, essentially repair projects less than 25,000, we can get a lot more for our money. That's what we did 2 years ago out on Papoose, and is why Mr. Traxler mentioned that we didn't need mud mats out there last year, because we did a pretty good $24,999 project out there that most folks that looked at it thought it was more like $55,000 worth of work, and it really improved the situation on that road last spring.
Sorry, one more thing. So these mud mats that you're mentioning, how many roads are we having to deploy those on, and what about does it cost to put those out?
So I don't have exact numbers on that. It varies from year to year, and it's interesting that the failures that we see in roads move around on the roads. The length of them changes every year, and the exact location of them changes every year. And some years, depending on how we dry out in the springtime, we need a lot less than we do in other years. And over time, we've improved those kinds of sites, so the numbers have been going down. But you can still have a bad spring, a bad breakup, where we need more mud mats than we have. Typically, the breakup starts in the southern part of the borough near the inlet, and those roads thaw out first, and they'll be the first ones to get mud mats. And then as those roads dry out and other roads thaw further north, we pick those mud mats up and take them further north for other roads. I don't know the exact number or the cost. I think we provided some detail to borough admin a year or so ago, and we could try to dig that up for you again. So it's done typically by borough on-call temp employees that are supervised by full-time employees, and so the labor costs are relatively small. We do every year damage some of those mud mats, and we have to replace them. If I was just going to guess, ballpark, I'm thinking right around $50,000 or so a year at most.
But not all in RSA 21.
Oh,
right,
no,
Chris?
this is
Yeah.
all over the borough this occurs.
Okay, follow up, sir? No? Okay. Assemblyperson McKee?
Thank you. When I was looking at some of the notes, it said, one of them said the RSA 21 supervisors have requested their state representatives to use some of the state's millions of federal stimulus dollars for drainage and culverts to help with these projects. Why aren't we moving ahead with that, saying, okay, we got these impassable roads, that's definitely infrastructure. How come there's not more emphasis on obtaining those kinds of funds, which are over and above what they have?
I don't think the legislature yet has any appropriation to know whether they got $5 million each or they got $500 million each. So that's why, in my opinion, that's why they're really restricted, because there hasn't been the allocation yet, I don't think, from the feds down to the state, and how then that's going to be allocated in the state. So I think it's on everybody's radar. And, but it's a ways yet before we will get a figure.
And so it's kind of like the time frame. It's saying we need these impassable roads fixed now versus the uncertainty of when and how much from the federal funding.
Yeah, go ahead, sir.
Through the mayor to Ms. McKee, I think there's a little bit of false optimism, maybe.
Yeah.
There's all this federal money going to come down to the local level. And we've listened to presentations from the governor's office and had conversations with the Alaska Municipal League. We've talked to DOT. Like, we are trying to figure that out too. But I think the reality is there isn't as much funding flowing to the local level as folks might hope. And a lot of that's because it's going to be tied up. New spending is going to be tied up in formula funding that's already existing. So DOT is going to take that and apply it to an existing structure. It's not necessarily going to flow to the local level. We're going to look for those grant opportunities, but where any of that discretionary spending exists, it's likely to be competitive and it's likely to be limited. So I don't know that I would stake a claim on federal funding to fix this problem. And I think it's some of it's just a structure of our limited government. We have these road service areas. They can only raise so much revenue on a given year. And then we just have to be very frugal and prioritize the spending. And I think, I mean, in my opinion, stepping back and watching this conversation with RSA 21 and the Big Lake community, what you have is a difference of opinion on what the priority should be for how we address those roads. And I know that's probably oversimplifying it a little bit, but I think that's really what we're talking about here. And the reality is there's only so much money to go around. Our structure of government limits our ability to go in there and do that. Every road service area experiences the same limitation. It's just a matter of what their tax base is and how much revenue they happen to generate. And you live within your means. So I don't think there's a silver bullet here to fix this problem. What we've been doing is working. It's just not working quickly. And I think, we're going to see, because the task force legislation passed tonight, we'll see what another group of folks that look at this problem think about because I think, and it was probably Mr. Sumner's amendment, there probably needs to be a discussion about how we could potentially create some new processes to speed up this process. And I don't know exactly what that looks like, but one of the suggestions that was made a couple meetings ago was, RSAs could bond, could take debt and borrow money to expedite the process. I'm not suggesting that's the answer, but that's not a process that the borough currently employs. So it's not to say there aren't options out there. They just might not be options that we can live with.
Thank you.
Any further discussion from the assembly? Okay, Madam Clerk, I think we're ready then I should ask if there's any objection, I guess. Is there any objection?
To the motion to amend something previously adopted.
So if you have an objection, then we would go to a vote. If you don't have an objection, then the motion passes. Oh, I'm sorry.
This is Yunt, I object.
Okay, thank you. And Assemblyperson Hale, I think maybe I missed you, or was that a previous request?
No, thank you, Madam Mayor. I was just going to call the question.
Okay, all right. Okay.
Okay, if I can get the members in the room to go ahead and vote. Assemblymember Hale.
Yes.
Assemblymember Yunt.
No.
Assemblymember Bernier.
No.
Madam Mayor, let's see, let me count these out. I've got something, it's hard to do it when I'm on the phone. I've only got 6 votes. Who do I not have? I got 4. Okay, thank you. Thank you for bearing with me. It has failed with Assemblymember Hale, McKee, and Nowers in support.
So back to our agenda, we do not have any referrals. We do not have any reconsiderations. We now to the point of mayor, assembly, and staff comments. And I know sometimes this is a time when people clean the room, but tonight when it comes to the mayor and I'm last, I am going to talk a little bit about my vision for fulfilling the appointments for the task force. So anyway, no comments, sir? Mr. Brown, comments? Clerk, Ms. Clerk?
No.
No, okay. All righty, so that takes care of staff. Assemblyperson Nowers, did you have ending comments?
Thank you. Looking forward to our planning commission meeting. I will be remote on that. Unfortunately, I can't be there in person. And I did listen in on the planning commission meeting last night on the gravel legislation. I would just recommend anybody who's following that to listen in. The testimony was unanimously against, including industry, and the planning commission recommended we oppose it. And I know Mr. Tu said he's looking at some amendments if those can be given out in advance. So that's something the public can take a look at. I know they'll be following that. Thank you.
Okay. Let me go online. Parting comments. Assemblyperson Hale.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. No comment.
Okay. Assemblyperson Yon. Parting comments.
No comment. Enjoy your evening, everyone.
Assemblyperson Benair. Parting comments, sir.
Prayers for Ukraine and God bless Matsu Borough in Alaska.
Okay. And Assemblyperson 2, comments?
No comment.
Okay. Assemblyperson McKee, parting comments? Okay. Deputy Mayor, parting comments?
Yeah, so
I missed that.
I voted against the amendment for the RSA RIP list because honestly, to me, it seems to represent a change in direction that Assemblymember 2 has said came from his interaction with voters, and that they want the substandard roads, the most substandard roads addressed first, and dust control. And I don't think that we should obstruct. He is elected to represent that district, and if that's the will of the voters, we shouldn't, as an assembly, obstruct him enacting that change in his district. But additionally, I also see things on the RSA's RIP list, like an environmental study on the effects of calcium chloride, and that just seems to be not a very good use of very limited RSA funds. So I do question that. But on another matter, I pulled the introduction of the Ordinance 22-003, the exemption of the conditional use permit for the landfill, because I think it would be more advisable for us to actually have the borough apply for a conditional use permit. And so I'd move to direct the manager to go forth and apply for a conditional use permit for the landfill for earth materials extraction. And it seems like a pretty straightforward thing to do, because we're already digging gravel out of the landfill. We have to do something with that gravel. So I would hope that we could figure that out. We have a whole planning staff. I had hoped not unnecessarily waste a lot of staff time on it, but I think that that's really the only direction that we can go at this point.
I guess we're going to circle back around assembly person hours.
Thank you. I really want to hear what you have to say, but I would just, can I clarify, are you suggesting we direct the manager to apply for a CUP for the entire landfill?
I move to direct the manager to apply for a CUP for earth materials extraction for that portion of the landfill that he foreseeably sees necessary for the next 5 years.
So this was a topic of discussion previously. Our code says that if you don't exercise your extraction rights under a conditional use permit for the period of 5 years, the permit expires. So you can't go say, give me a permit now to dig 50 years from now, right? So I know there's a sequencing plan.
Okay.
Mr. Dolan knows where he needs to go.
Okay.
And as Member Sumner just said, they're gonna have to get their heads together, use their judgment, and talk with the
So they
planning
can get-
department and
okay.
apply and go to the planning commission and get something approved.
That answers my question.
Okay, so now on his suggestion, do we need to take action or?
Yes, Madam Mayor, Assemblymember Sumner did move a motion.
Okay.
So
Okay.
there does need to be action on it.
Okay, so discussion on his motion to direct the manager. Any discussion from anybody? Okay, any objections to the motion passing? Okay, I don't hear any, so that motion then has passed. Okay? And let's see, I think I've gone through all the staff and all of the assembly members for their comments. Since the task force has been created, so unless there's a reconsideration or something, this is my plan. I have asked the borough manager to put up on our website where the borough website is, and then there's a slash and it says boards, and probably a lot of you have been on there already. There will be a special drop down for the task force, and that probably will be up in the next few days. So I will encourage you, those that are interested, or if you have nominees that you would like to see on there, encourage them to go on and apply. And I want to give that 2 weeks for people to apply, which would end, and I'm just going to say March 18th, which is a Friday by 5 p.m. So anyone, you can, fill one out for yourself, encourage other people that you want to see fill out, and which has been pretty much my standard procedure since I've been mayor, that if there is a vacancy that deals with a specific assembly district, whether it's an RSA or planning commission or a plating board or whatever, I have looked to the assembly person for that area because I feel that they know probably a lot more, maybe except for Palmer, know a lot more about the person and how it would fit into what needs to happen. So that's my plan. I will put that, announce that again tomorrow on my blog when I do that. And if anybody has any questions, feel free to call me. And so that's our game plan. I appreciate very much the administration going ahead and putting up, the extra drop down. So to me, this is the most fair way to go about it. I've had people already say, I want to be on, but all of those, as far as I'm concerned, are pushed aside. And we now have this open procedure where, when on the 18th, I will share with the assembly, maybe even before that, if some members come in. So hopefully that will clear that up. It'll make it a very open procedure as far as I'm concerned. And I look forward to choosing, along with the assembly's confirmation, a very robust, a very experienced, a very ethical task force that will help us solve some of these problems we're facing. Thank you. And with that, you want to say something?
I do.
Okay.
I apologize.
No problem.
I just wanted to announce to the assembly members who may not have seen their email that I've hired Sonia Pevin, who is the city clerk for Houston, as the deputy clerk, and she'll be starting on the 21st of this month. And I'm very excited to have her.
So with that, I will adjourn at 8:45.